Hey guys, it's Bree. I hope you are having a good Wednesday. And you know Wednesday means that here it is time for a review, and this week we're talking about Fledgling by Octavia Butler. So this was a book. I have read a number of Octavia Butler books in the past and really enjoyed them. I find generally that she's very good at kind of the emotional tug and story construction and language use and all of that good stuff. This was not a book for me though. So the story is about Shori, who is the main character. Shori is in a 10-year-old's body and she wakes up with burns all over, her head has been bashed in. Basically, there has been a massive attack and she no longer remembers anything about her life. She wanders out into a road and is picked up by this dude named Wright. And right away, the story gets a little weird for me because Shori is physically 10 and then Shori bites him and drinks his blood and then has sex with him. We really quickly get to the point where we meet Shori's family. They kind of mutually have tracked each other down. And Shori goes to see her father. Her father tells her about what she is, which is called an Ina, which is basically the starting point for the human myths of vampires. And she finds out that she is one of these, that she's been living in a village with her mothers, and that basically she's 53 years old, which is supposed to, I think, give us a sigh of relief. Shori is very clearly different than the rest of the Ina. She is black. The rest of the Ina are kind of your prototypical, like, super tall white dude with, like, the ashen gray skin from just being, like, devoid of blood. And she finds out that she was part of a genetic experiment to let the Ina be out in the sun and to let them be awake during the day should they need to be. Her family's gotten a lot of praise for this, but now is under attack. And when Shori shows up at her father and brothers, they are attacked again. They're attacked during the day. Shori is the only Ina to make it out. And it's very clear that they are after her. She proceeds then to kind of go to the vampire community at large, getting help and kind of figuring out what's going on. It turns out that there is this kind of underlying tension where some people agree that as a genetic experiment that lets Ina walk in the sun, she's fantastic. And others are total bigot assholes. And the race aspect isn't necessarily surprising because Butler focuses on race in a lot of her stories. But this is definitely one where I think she tried to keep too many balls in the air. We'll talk about the age thing last because for me that was such a big one. But I had a number of other problems with this book. First, we can talk pacing and story development. There are a number of things about this that for me just weren't clicking. The pace itself would go from quite fast to very slow and drawn out to quite fast again and very slow and drawn out. To me, it wasn't very steady, and it kind of lost its impact as far as actual plot structure goes. The characters were all right. None of them was one I felt particularly attached to, and there was like a very clear constructed divide between human characters and the Ina characters, and since it's told from the Ina perspective, a lot of it's just like, oh, the humans will never understand us, which for me doesn't work because you're telling this story to a human. Why are you telling me about how I'll never understand you instead of trying to explain? I think one of the biggest things from structure-wise that I had a problem with was the total loss of any knowledge. So she totally doesn't realize at the start that she's this kind of Ina vampire, and she loses all knowledge of their world, which is a pretty big deal, right? From there, it just turns into a story about how these families have been kind of out to get hers. But because I don't have any understanding and Shori doesn't have any understanding of the world at large, it doesn't necessarily feel like something that's actually built up, right? Like it just feels like a retelling of a specific event without the context around the event. Also, the discussion of race in this is like super heavy-handed. There's a court process that's supposed to be like vampire court, I guess. Like a vampire council convenes to figure out what's happened, and like people call her a mongrel bitch. And for me, it was just like, dude, everyone is losing their shit on this stand and just using racial slurs everywhere. Like, what is going on? You're supposed to be this controlled 500-year-old adult, and you can't keep your language in line when you know it's damning and you know that it's just a, you know, a version of your child trying to poke at you. There are some really interesting things. So there's toxin in the Ina saliva, which I thought was kind of an interesting idea. And basically what happens is it enters into the human bloodstream when the Ina are feeding, and basically makes the humans addicted to being fed on. It also does things like heightens pleasure and makes them live for a really long time and heal really well. So it's supposed to be this symbiotic thing. I'm not sure that it was entirely convincing. I'm not sure really how I felt about it. I like the idea, but the execution was again one of those mini kind of balls in the air that just none of them flew quite right for me. And then of course there's the big aspect. She's in a 10-year-old's body, and I don't care how many times the main guy, Wright, tells her, I shouldn't feel this way about you because you're in a 10-year-old's body, it's still gross and weird. And it still really kind of killed the book for me. For me, it was one of those things where I read that and I was like, well, you're doing that. And I just really couldn't get into it. On top of that, I mean, it's just kind of weird to try to infantilize a character you're simultaneously trying to make into an adult. And I understand why she's doing it, because she's supposed to be a child in their society, but it felt really pasted on because her being young had nothing to do with her body, as opposed to comparatively to the other Ina, she is young. And I think you could have done that without having her be a 10-year-old having sex. I think overall this just was not going to work for me, and I probably could have given up on it from the beginning, but I made it through and, you know, figured I would share that with you. I'm really interested actually to hear from people who have different perspectives on Fledgling, because it just didn't work for me, and I would love to know what about it worked for you. So go ahead and leave me a comment about it down below. Let me know what you thought of it. Other than that, you guys know the drill. Make sure to like and subscribe. I hope you're having a fantastic Wednesday, and I'll see you Friday with my Friday reads. Bye.